Thank you for joining us for the 2022 Currie Family Lecture, Prominence of Place, Union Presbyterian Seminary's Charlotte campus, and the Expansion of Theological Excellence. The lecture, offered by Dr. Bill Sweetzer, is a bookend to his lecture last year on the history of the Richmond campus. Today, Dr. Sweetzer will pick up his conversation, turning his gaze southward toward the Queen City. Introducing the lecture is the Dean of the Charlotte campus, Dr. Richard Boyce. Dean Boyce, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you everyone who is gathered with us on the screen and virtually tonight. This is the 2022 Currie Family Lecture Series, and it's kicking off a big year in the life of Union Presbyterian Seminary in general and the Charlotte campus in particular. I cannot believe it. February 2002 is the date when the Charlotte campus began as a risky, precarious sort of attempt to broaden the work of Union Presbyterian Seminary and theological education through a campus for part-time, non-residential students in Charlotte, North Carolina, 20 years ago. And so 2022 provides us an opportunity to give thanks to God for the past 20 years and the great vitality of this campus as part of Union Presbyterian Seminary as its grand history continues. We're particularly grateful to the Currie family, not only to Tom Currie, whom you'll probably hear from later, our founding dean, but the Currie family in general, who endowed this lecture series and who has a deep passion for two things, church history and missions, and is eager to see the seminary continue to explore the ways those two classic disciplines of theological education can continue to feed and energize and guide the work of the church in the future. We're grateful to Bill Sweetzer. He and Bob Whalen were our two church history professors as we began this venture, and Bill has continued faithfully with us even through his retirement. And now, as he said, he gave us the northern history, and now he moves south to the Queen City to help us remember the founding rationale of this campus and some of the history of this campus over the past 20 years. I am so deeply grateful to have been part of this story and to continue to be part of this story this year. This 20th anniversary, we celebrate a couple of things. One, as I've already announced, 20 years of vitality here in the Queen City, but also my impending retirement. I don't know which is the greater celebration, but I'm excited and deeply grateful to have been a part of this chapter in Union Presbyterian Seminary's history, my alma mater. I look forward to our discussion tonight. Encourage you to offer your own questions. We've provided an intro video, and Dr. Sweetzer will provide some more comments to get our conversation started. Thanks to the Currie family for making this possible. Thanks to all of you for being present. I now turn it over to Christopher Edmondson, who will bring us greetings from our Board of Trustees.
Thank you so much, Richard. And first thing to say is thank you for your service to the seminary as you march these final weeks and months towards your official retirement date. The seminary will be in debt to you, the debt of great gratitude, as we thank God for the gifts that you shared over these many years with our Charlotte campus community and students. That's the first thing. The second thing is to say I'm Christopher Edmondson. I'm the brand new chair of the Board of Trustees. I just really started my official term at the beginning of this year. And I bring you greetings from that board. We are thrilled that this anniversary has arrived, that the Charlotte campus has marked this important moment. And we look forward to partnering with faculty and students providing our leadership and our wisdom to make sure that the campus continues to thrive and grow and frame pastors, preachers, educators, and servants in God's church in the years to come, just as it has done the past 2 decades. One of the highlights of every board meeting for us is when we get to meet the student representatives from both campuses. And when we get to eat meals, it's a little harder on Zoom with some of the COVID restrictions, but that's still one of the highlights. And we are always so moved by the stories that the students tell of their learning experiences on our campuses. So on behalf of the entire board of trustees, our vice chair, our secretary, all the committee chairs, the folks that think and live and pray and work with Dr. Blunt and the 2 deans and the senior leadership team week in and week out, we welcome you to this Currie Lecture. And we say thanks be to God for the vision of Tom Currie that helped start the whole thing. One of my personal stories is I got to take a tour of the campus on the Queens campus before it even moved out on Sharon Road near Sharon Presbyterian there in the weeks leading up. And Tom Currie was so excited about this opportunity. And I can remember that like it was yesterday. But that will be part of the story that Dr. Sweetzer tells throughout the evening. But God's blessings to you all and welcome to this Currie Family Lecture. And thanks be to God for 20 years of the Charlotte campus, of the Charlotte life of Union Presbyterian Seminary. With that, Tom Currie is with us tonight, and he wanted to offer a couple words for us as we prepare to hear from our speaker tonight and take questions and answers. So, Tom?
Thank you, Christopher. On behalf of the Currie family, I want to say how pleased and delighted and grateful we are to Union Presbyterian Seminary for this time of presentation and reflection, and for many other reasons too, for the gift of their ministry and service over 200 years. I want to say 2 words in particular, gratitude to my deep friend and colleague, Richard Boyce, who has done such a magnificent job as dean, and who, in my judgment, is the embodiment of the best that our church can produce in terms of ministry and leadership, and someone who was a huge gift to the seminary when I was working there and has remained so, and I remain in his debt. He pulled many of my chestnuts out of the fire, so I'm grateful for that. Secondly, I want to say a deep, in particular, word of thanks for Bill Sweetzer. When I first knew Bill, he was a pastor in South Virginia and recently minted PhD under Rebecca Weaver, and written a dissertation on the Laus Perennis folks in medieval France, and commuted from there to Charlotte on weekends to teach our students church history, and did a great job, does a great job with that. Not just a scholar and teacher, but a good friend and wonderful human being, and also someone who is fun to be around. So my heart is very full tonight because of those connections. And of course, I also want to recommend you all to read Bill's book, A Copious Fountain, The History of Union, if you've not already. It's a wonderful chronicle of that wonderful institution. So I'll be interested to hear what Bill has to say, but I want him to know in advance how grateful I am for him and his service. And I'll turn it over now to Deandra.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Deandra Brooks, and I'm a first-year student entering into my second semester. And I just reflect upon my first semester and just listening to what everyone's saying here. And I, too, am so grateful and indebted to the seminary and my professors, Dr. Davis, who's represented here, and Dr. Boyce, and President Blunt, everyone that's been so instrumental in my journey here. I'm humbled and grateful and excited to be first a student at the seminary here in Charlotte and to offer the welcome on behalf of the student body in Charlotte. So when I was asked to do it, I didn't hesitate, and I thank you for that. And as I sit here in the space with you, I'm reminded of our chapel service last Saturday. And there were many references to Charlotte being the outlier that wasn't expected to survive. And so the seminary at Charlotte, it defied that status quo they talked about 20 years ago, and it continues to do that, just like Jesus Christ did during his earthly ministry, to fulfill the kingdom purpose while we're here. And I think about Dr. Sweetzer's his sermon last Saturday, and he told us to jump into the deep end. And I personally connected with the sermon for a number of reasons. So we can talk about that over coffee maybe one day. And so, so last night also in the first of the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, African American Social Justice, Just Preach, Just Act lecture series, Dr. William Turner, he gave us his sermon, and he talked about preaching weighty matters that challenged the church, the Big C church, to go beyond the status quo and to be the Micah 6:8 church in the world. And today I offer to pray, discern, and work, empowered by the Holy Spirit, to press toward what the Lord calls for each of us to do against all odds. So on behalf of, first I'm also a student ambassador for the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, which I've really enjoyed my time there, and the work that we're doing, the opportunity I'm able to learn. And on behalf of the Union Presbyterian Seminary in Charlotte, I welcome all of you and thank you.
Welcome. As you've heard so many people this evening talk of their great love for this seminary and for its ministry and what it has brought to the church. And if you do read, and I echo Tom's sentiment, I hope you do read A Copious Fountain. It's the systematic history of Union Presbyterian Seminary. It talks about its culture and its historical context and the way in which Union has distinctively led in theological education. We're talking a lot this year about the 20th anniversary of the Charlotte campus, and it's a part of this greater and more robust and incredible history. Bill Sweetzer scoured original source documents and primary sources, and he looked at pictures and he did interviews and he poured hours and hours into this work, but he gave a copious amount of love, and it captures a sense of who we are, as any page can capture a sense of who God called this institution to be. And we are thankful for William Bill Sweetzer. He is a native of California. He graduated from the University of California and then from Union Presbyterian Seminary with multiple degrees, including his PhD. He served for 8 years as in the Navy, and he is now an honorably retired minister living in the mountains of North Carolina, where he served a congregation until his retirement. For 15 years, he was in ministry with us on the Charlotte campus as an adjunct professor. What I'd also like you to know, as someone for whom pedagogy is very important, Bill didn't just stick with what we think of as dusty old tomes of information in history. No, he had Friday night movie nights for students, and he let them vote on which historical documentary and period and film they wanted to watch. Here's also what students had to say about him. He had a great laugh. He says when a nervous first-year student would turn in their paper, he would consistently say, "Grace abounds." You can still hear that refrain in the halls of the seminary as we have these first-year students, who many of whom haven't been in school for a long time, or who are coming to the area of humanities from a business background, and they are nervous. And Bill would simply look at them and say, with all the grace that he had within him, grace abounds. And the last thing that the students would like you to know about him is that he loves the Dairy Queen. And I'm hoping that in your retirement, you are finding plenty of time to meet with friends at the Dairy Queen. Bill, we are honored to have you here, and we are delighted to share in conversation about a school that we all love and about its history, which is so significant in the life of this church. Bill, we invite you.
Rebecca, thank you so much. And I have to tell you that there are no Dairy Queens around Spruce Pine, so I often have to find excuses to go to Asheville, and through the grace of God, they come very frequently. Thank you so much. Before I begin, I would like to say a special thanks to Tom and the Currie family. When I first met Tom in 2003, I wasn't sure that Charlotte was going to survive, and I think there were times when Tom kind of wished he was somewhere else. Tom, I thank you for your perseverance, in that good Calvinist phrase, and I think that your work can be seen in the students who have graduated and gone on to serve the church. I want to congratulate Richard on his retirement. Richard, it's great. So I also want to thank Eric Futterman for his excellent videos, both this year and last year. Eric, you make us look good. Thank you. We often think that establishing the campus in Charlotte is an example of non-traditional thinking that is absolutely foreign to the tradition-bound Union Presbyterian Seminary. The video had a part of this, but I want to focus on a theme and emphasize that establishing a campus in Charlotte is really not exceptional when viewed in the context of the history. In fact, I would argue that the campus in Charlotte is just another example of how innovation is part of Union's DNA. We don't often realize it, and sometimes it seems hard to believe, but Union has been at the forefront of theological education since the 1880s. Walter W. Moore introduced a new method of teaching Hebrew and Greek, which is still used in seminaries. Instead of memorizing lists of vocabulary as they did in the 19th century, we start reading from the Hebrew Bible almost immediately. In the 1890s, he launched Union Seminary magazine, and because he understood the reach of rural free delivery, it was one of the country's most widely circulated theological journals for over 50 years. Union Seminary created the first Christian education department in the South and helped create the Presbyterian School of Christian Education. By the end of the 1920s, Union was laying the foundations of what we would call continuing education through the town and country seminars. In the 1930s, Union spearheaded accreditation for all seminaries in the United States. After World War II, Union was one of the first seminaries to include clinical pastoral education in the curriculum, use radio and television to teach homiletics, and establish the first seminary recording library in the country. So I would argue that establishing a campus in Charlotte is just one more innovation in our history. Charlotte and Richmond are not separate, but they are indeed bound together by a shared history, and I would say a shared dedication to innovation. But I do want to say one thing that may at least grind some gears. I like to think that the story of the Charlotte campus begins in 1891. Now, I can't prove it, but I suspect that Walter W. Moore wanted to move the Union from Hampton, Sydney to Davidson College. Again and again in his correspondence, he mentions that the tobacco barons of North Carolina would more readily support a seminary in their own backyard. It was a native of Charlotte, and he loved North Carolina. George W. Watts, however, short-circuited those plans. He convinced Lewis Ginter to donate land for a seminary in his new suburban development in Richmond. And the minutes of the board for that meeting are very interesting because Watts announces this gift of land and the president is absolutely silent. Moore had nothing to say. I think he had Charlotte in mind all along. But the fact that the seminary went to Richmond really had no effect on the North Carolina influence. Good ideas just don't go away that easily. Bill White remembers that James Jones, when he was pastor of Myers Park Presbyterian Church in the late 1940s, before he was president of Union Seminary, first broached the idea of either moving Union Seminary to Charlotte or establishing some type of campus in the city. As we all know, his idea went nowhere, and most people thought that Union's strength lay in its residential model. Yet when Lewis Weeks was inaugurated as Union's president in 1994, it was clear times had changed. With the rise of two-income families, the inroads made by non-denominational seminaries, and new possibilities created by the internet, and we are a good example of that tonight, the residential campus became only one of several options for theological education. And it's important for us to realize that by the late 1990s, many seminaries were experimenting with satellite campuses. From the Presbyterian view of things, these satellite campuses were abject failures. Columbia tried a campus in Orlando. San Francisco tried one in Southern California, and they both just didn't seem to work. President Weeks, however, grasped two important points. First, demographics. It may surprise us to realize, but almost 2/3 of all Presbyterians live within 250 miles of a line between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Charlotte. In the year 2000, more Presbyterians lived within 100 miles of Charlotte than lived within 100 miles of Chicago, Richmond, Atlanta, and San Francisco. Moreover, it's important to realize that Charlotte is the center of African American Presbyterianism. More African American communicants and churches are in Charlotte Presbytery than any other presbytery in the USA. In the Presbyterian Church USA. Besides demographics, President Weeks wanted to make sure the new campus had local support. He often said that local support was the missing ingredient in the previous attempts to establish satellite campuses. North Carolina presbyteries, churches, and individuals wanted a seminary in Charlotte. Again and again at presbytery meetings, they would talk about how important it was for Union to have a campus in Charlotte. But most importantly, they were willing to fund it. In 2001, $2.4 million was pledged towards the new campus. By 2003, pledges totaled $9 million. The scaffolding was being built. A campus in Charlotte was going to be a reality. The president of Queens College, Billy Weirman, who was also a Presbyterian elder, authored office and classroom space in Trexler Hall above the cafeteria, as long as classes were held on the weekends. Morton Library sent 6,000 volumes to the new library, and Dr. Randolph Taylor, former pastor of Myers Park Presbyterian Church and the first moderator of the reunited PCUSA, donated his extensive library. And the scaffolding was completed with the call of Thomas W. Currie as the first dean and professor of theology in April 2001. As Richard mentioned, it's hard to believe that just 20 years ago, on February 2nd, 2002, with Tom Currie teaching the Christian life and Richard Boyce teaching Hebrew, that Union Presbyterian Seminary Charlotte campus began classes. That fall, Pamela Mitchell-Legg would teach Christian education, and Rodney Sadler taught Hebrew, Greek, and all the Bible classes. Total enrollment was 38, exceeding the original goal for first-year admissions. It was proof that there was a need for a campus in Charlotte, and it was also proof that there was a new model of theological education, which would not replace residential teaching, but would be complementary to it. After 11 years at Queens, the Charlotte campus moved to a new building on the grounds of Sharon Presbyterian Church in September 2012. The building was 22,000 square feet, and it cost $5.2 million, plus the cost of whiteboards for my room. Just like Watts Hall in 1898, classes had to begin a week late because the building was behind schedule. But the important thing to remember is that it was paid for. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that this new building honored Walter W. Moore's commitment to innovation. A stained glass window removed from Schaeffler Hall in Richmond during the library renovation is now prominently located in the new building. Now, all of us like to say that the Charlotte campus is something new, that we're doing something new, and in a sense, I think that's true. But on this evening, I'd like all of us to remember that innovation is in our DNA. I think in the last couple of years with the COVID issues, we have been shown both the limitations and the possibilities with computers. And I think it's important that still students want to gather and learn, not just from professors, but from each other. On this 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Charlotte campus, I urge all of us to remember that although how we learn may not be the same as in the past, we can take confidence that what we learn has stood the test of time to give hope to our tired world. Tom, I say thank you for your efforts, to those who have gone before, to President Weeks, who had the vision and who ultimately got the campus built. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Unmute yourself, Beck.
How many times do I say that, customers? I know. The professor still needs to be schooled at times.
Yes.
Bill, thank you so much. And particularly for pointing out I love that phrase, that innovation is in the DNA of Union Seminary. And I couldn't agree more. So you and I have have the particular gift of being able to teach these first-year students. They have church history in the morning, and then they come in one of the practical theology courses in the afternoon, which is where I get them. I would like to know, wonder, two audiences. What do you want students, these first-year students, to know about this distinctiveness of theological education at Union. And the second part of that is we are searching for 2 new full-time colleagues on the Charlotte campus. And so we will have, we will add to our numbers. What would you like those new colleagues to know about the distinctiveness of theological education at Union, and in particular on the Charlotte campus?
Wow. There are 2 things I would say. First of all, I always had students walking into the classroom for the first time. They had been out of school for a while, and there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of wondering. And there were 2 things that I could assure them. Number one, they were going to learn what other students in other seminaries did. They were going to get a quality education with integrity. And I think that's what we offered. The other thing, which I never really got the hang of, was that I always wondered how a community would be formed. And I always found out that using Google or something, students would create their own community. I never got the hang of it, so there always had to be one person to let me know what was going on with all the students. But the way that community was formed to me was amazing. And it's a testimony to them that they could form that community, because the community of the church is not the same community that I grew up in. It's going to be different. And that they were forming that community, and lifelong friendships have been formed. For the for new faculty members coming in, I would say, number one, the students want to know what they need to know. They have families, they have jobs. They don't want to sit around and theorize. They want to know what they want to know to be effective ministers. That is the important thing. The other thing is to be flexible. When I say grace abounds, I really mean it. A lot of times, students with families have things happen, and you have to be graceful. You have to make sure they understand what is going on, but you also have to be able to say, okay, you can learn this later, or we're going to cover it again. That's the big thing: community and flexibility.
I think those are wise words for both students and for professors coming in. So let me say to those who are watching, please feel free to add your questions and your comments. We've seen some comments here in the chat, but definitely ask your questions, and we'll be happy to convey them and incorporate them into the conversation. I may be pushing you a little out of your comfort zone as a historian, but speaking as a pastor, with the wisdom that comes from being in the pastorate and the insight from being a historian, what's the next innovation in theological education that we have to offer and that we need to meet head on?
I was not given the gift of prophecy, however many times I wish I could have predicted the rise of cryptocurrency. What I think, from having served 3 small churches, having retired from one, I wonder if the traditional model of ministry of the full-time minister is going to be viable for small churches, to be blunt. I think that students coming to seminary looking for a career change, I think we would do well to say, do you want to be a tent maker? I'm not sure that small churches are going to be able to support a minister, to be honest. My wife and I were fortunate when we moved to Spruce Pine. She had just retired from the Commonwealth of Virginia. She's a retired naval officer. Buying a house here was not a problem. Housing prices in Spruce Pine have, in the last 2 years, gone up considerably. So how can a church, which is struggling, help a family move here and buy a house? I think that the church a church at large is going to have to face the fact that perhaps part-time ministry is going to be the model for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Tom and Richard, feel free to jump in if you have questions or you see a direction you'd like the conversation to go in. You both know me well enough that I can fill the airspace, but want to create space for other questions.
I don't have any, I can't speak to the latter question that you asked Becky of Bill, but I do remember some of the ways that community was formed at the seminary. And I don't know if I've been away, so I don't know to what extent this still obtains, but we had a cohort system at the beginning, and everybody experienced the curriculum in the same way going through. And that had that had some powerful ways of, well, you start out taking Hebrew with Richard Boyce, you bond in a classroom. Another thing, though, and I'll tell one brief story about it that I've always remembered. I can't remember if it was in Hebrew or Greek, but one of our students who worked for, it was either UPS or FedEx and lived north of Charlotte, was having trouble with the languages. But he was in a cohort with some folks and was close to them who lived in Raleigh-Durham area. And once a week, he had to deliver stuff from Huntersville over to Raleigh-Durham. And so he would drive over there on a Wednesday, and on Wednesday night in his motel room, the folks that were studying in Charlotte but who lived in the Raleigh-Durham area would come to his motel room and they would study Greek in preparation for the next Saturday's class. And that happened on its own. I mean, that was completely, obviously, we had nothing to do with that administratively. But that was one of the ways the community evidenced itself and grew out of that experience of studying.
Mm-hmm. And Tom, that still happens. I mean, one of the most amazing things about being on this campus is that cohort model and the how tight these students are, and they dig in and they help each other. And now social media has certainly, some cohorts have Facebook groups, some cohorts use GroupMe, and I know that when we had to do that hard pivot with the pandemic in March of 2020, there was concern about what would happen. And then as we came into the fall of 2020, how would we create community in the same way? And they didn't miss a beat. These students found ways to make sure they stayed connected. And in fact, this year's second year cohort was last year's first year. They had never met in person until the beginning of this fall, and you would not know it. Because they are just as close and tight as anybody who came every Saturday and drove.
That's amazing.
It's just a beautiful thing to see. It really is.
Yeah, I'd jump in just quickly here, and I'm not a prophet either, Bill, nor a visionary, and I tend to move slowly. The truth be told, I was on the task force, and I worried deeply as we were talking about this new venture on this very topic. How would we form community on a part-time, non-residential campus? And it really did worry me lots. In fact, we read a book called Being There. And its argument was that formation for ministry occurs as much outside the classroom as inside the classroom. And so, Tom, I began to be very much attached to the hallway conversations, the meal times, the coffee maker, little vestibule there, those providential kind of conversations and encounters that went on outside class have been very precious to me. But as Dr. Davis has just observed, we now have a couple of cohorts who have very rarely been on campus. And just like we learned how our original cohorts formed community through hotel, gatherings, through carpooling and conversations on the way, through phones, then fax, then texting and Facebook, etc. These recent cohorts are as bonded as the others. So I think the way the Holy Spirit enables the formation of community, even via virtual means, is something that I'm learning lots about. I dare you to tell the cohorts that came in 20 and 21 that they are any less tight than the cohorts with which we began. This is a hard task, this theological education, and it does bond people together in ways that form friendships, not just in their seminary days, but one of my great celebrations, Tom and Bill and Becky, is watching the friendships continue now 10, 12 years out in ministry. So I'm doing my very best to lean in to the potential of less face-to-face time, but intentional ways of forming community. Not only we've got to do everything to justify our face-to-face time. If folks are going to travel in and be together face-to-face, we have to make certain we're teaching in a way that requires that. But there are lots of opportunities for forming community, for education, for spiritual growth that can occur, as Bill's pointing out, in quote, non-traditional ways, building on the innovation that Bill is reminding us is at the heart of not only this institution, but the Church of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely, Richard. And, the four of us on this screen all had our theological educations in that very traditional residential program. And I do think that the cohort and the community that is being intentionally built, whether that is synchronous, in-person, synchronous virtually, or in person when you're physically on campus, is something that the Charlotte campus can gift to more traditional residential programs. I mean, we all knew what it was like to sit around the table in Lingle Hall after you've come out of a rousing church history lecture or a theology class with Rebecca Weaver and continue the conversation. And, our students, especially now, are really helping, shape us and our identities as professors and as co-learners with them. But that sense of community, I think, is one of the gifts that this Charlotte endeavor has to offer.
And I would like to point out we have a question. Well, actually, we've had two questions, and I don't want to cut you off, Rebecca, because I think those are really good points. But I have been asked a church history question, and I just can't pass this up. Joey Haynes asked me homoousios or homoousios.
Yes.
I have to say the older I get, the more I am a confirmed homoousian. So, but the other question he had, or two more, is that what is one of your favorite memories from your time at Charlotte? And what is your favorite century in church history? Well, let me add, my favorite century, to be quite honest, is the year 800, because it was a year of absolute chaos, and Charlemagne standardized the liturgy. He didn't say so. He didn't standardize it by asking people what they wanted, but Alcuin of York went around to the various cathedrals and he said, here's the liturgy. If you don't like it, we're going to burn you to death. So, a lot of times Presbyterian meetings have their points, but if you want to get something done, the emperor's got to do it. The other time, what is one of my favorite memories of your time at Charlotte? I am going to echo both Rebecca and Richard, because I enjoyed lunch the most. It was really nice to sit down and talk to people and get to know them, because when you're having lunch, people's guards are down and you could really just talk about things. I enjoyed the movie nights because I got to know people's families. And many times people would show up with relatives, and I can remember one woman telling me that she was anti-Christian, embarrassing her sister absolutely, and I loved it. And I said, well, let's talk after the movie. And I never got to have that conversation. So there's also another question that I'm not sure I can answer since I'm in the hinterlands. But Malcolm and Sarah Brownlee asked, what has the presence of UPS in Charlotte meant for the city of Charlotte and the Presbyterian Church in the Charlotte area?
Well, Richard could speak to that, probably.
Gosh, it's great to have Malcolm and Sarah
Yes.
on the screen. Malcolm chaired the task force that I
Yeah.
just mentioned. He was at the heart of the formation of this. And Malcolm, I would simply say this, believe it or not, one of my favorite things to do when I can is to go to a presbytery meeting in our contiguous presbytery. Not necessarily to join in the debate and to hear the reports, but simply to look at the gathered community and see how Union Presbyterian Seminary at Charlotte has changed the character of these presbyteries. Our graduates are now firmly in place as key leaders, not only in congregations, but in the leadership of these presbyteries. So the Reformed education and the diverse education, increasingly diverse education here on the Charlotte campus, the ability to think broadly, ecumenically, to relate our faith to current issues in a brave and risky kind of ways. Our graduates are carrying this education out into their leadership in the church. Bill, you mentioned the fact that there were leanings towards Charlotte, perhaps early on, and I think that's simply part of the history of this area, that these Scotch-Irish settlers brought their faith and their way of following Christ to this area a long time ago. And I really do think this extension campus in Charlotte is broadening and deepening that heritage in very tangible ways today. The Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation is another way, in the two centers in Richmond, that we're broadening that influence. But Bill White used to talk about how hard it was to raise more money before we had any product. He was talking about our graduates. We've got product now, and it's product that's producing fruit for the kingdom in ways that I find very, very exciting.
May I add on to that? I always made it a practice to have my students preach in my pulpit whenever I was gone. And I was amazed that just by having students come up and my congregation getting to know them, my little church felt more connected to the wider church. And there was more of an interest in what was happening in Charlotte. And the fact that they would talk about their classes and their families, I think made our church feel much more part of something larger than ourselves. So I think that having the seminary in Charlotte makes the Presbyterian presence more concrete, more real, if you will, when you meet students who are actually attending and learning and want to serve the church.
I wanted to just add something to that, not by way of its influence, but simply by way of recognition. First of all, I'm so glad that Malcolm asked that question and that Richard recognized the significant role that Malcolm played in the formation of that steering committee. And I'm glad also that Bill mentioned the role of Lewis Weeks and his determination to move forward with this. I think a couple of other people that I would mention would be Price Gwynn as somebody who was critically important, not only he was on the board of Union and in persuading the board to risk this venture, but also he was important in persuading presbyteries, that not only Charlotte, but conjoining presbyteries to participate. And of course, as already had been noted, Bill White and his efforts to raise money for this, which were significant. Just observe that.
Yes, miss Bill White a lot. There's also a conversation happening in the chat about bivocational ministry. Some call it tent making, others call it part-time, and a conversation about whether you can really be a part-time minister or if it's just full-time hours and part-time pay. And you know, as a seminary campus here in Charlotte that until this year, students were constrained to be part-time students. What do you think this particular kind of theological education has to offer the formation of ministers who are bivocational or ministers who are serving the small church in part-time ways?
I think the biggest thing or the biggest advantage of attending Charlotte is you learn how to segment your time. I think we have to look to the Baptist model, is that congregations understand that the minister works, so it's not available all the time, and the minister has to learn to say no. I have to work. So I think it's going to be a change, especially for Presbyterians, because our model has been the full-time minister. I think that's changing, and I think each congregation is going to have to find their own way of doing it. But for small churches, it's going to be difficult. And I'm not sure how many students, with all the student debt there is, will be able to serve small churches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is one of the great gifts of Union Presbyterian Seminary is its ability to support students financially in their tuition costs. So we're thankful. Tom, did you want to get in there?
No, when Bill mentioned that about student debt, I'm so glad you said what you said, Becky, because I think that at least at the beginning, and I assume now too, that was a crucial piece of the way, and I think also, again, that was Lewis Weeks' decision to try to do a third and a third and a third, and then later I think it got refined even more than that. But although sometimes students brought debt to the seminary, that very, very rarely did they leave seminary with debt from their education here.
I'm simply observing, Becky, I wish we could open the screen up to the folks that are over in the comment section, because Lewis Weeks is right here with us, and I wish he could speak, but I'm also seeing Megan Argabright on the comment section, and people like Jason Smith. Jason's someone who's working, as most of our students are, but he's already pastoring and working. And so that our students are developing some of those abilities already. And Megan's an example of a partnership between the presbytery, the seminary, and the Board of Pensions, trying to find a new financial models to help ministers that are just starting out in congregations that perhaps cannot afford the presbytery minimums without some assistance. So there's some creative things going on. I'm supervising a D-Min project by our own Frank Spencer at the Board of Pensions, and that's at the heart of what he's trying to figure out. Should we too quickly let go of full-time, quote, full-time ministry, or should we be exploring ways to perhaps new models of compensation that would at least allow more flexibility? But I think in great contrast to my experience in graduating from seminary, where I suddenly found myself cranking up my workload, many of our graduates are relieved once they get through seminary because they're free on Saturdays now, and they simply return to perhaps their bivocational lives they had before they came our way.
So I'm looking at the time and looking at the schedule that was sent out to us, and noticing that, Bill, I hope you're able to see, as well as Tom and Richard, the comments in the section, and so much affirmation about the direction of the conversation, and Bill, your particular contribution, and of course, Tom and Richard. But Richard, it is now your responsibility to make closing remarks and to help folks know how they can participate in this celebration of these 20 years of thanks and 20 more plus of yes, Lord. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. This is a little overwhelming. And if you haven't seen the video that Bill alluded to earlier, please take that opportunity and note that video is dedicated to the work and witness of Susan Hickok, who with Tom began this work in Charlotte. This is our hearts are full tonight as I look at the names in the comment section and think about the people who have enabled us to be here. Tom, are you getting ready to say something?
How do we access that video, Richard? I've not seen it.
It's
Is it on the website?
I don't know. Maybe Mike will help us out, but
Okay.
Tim can send out a link for this, I'm sure. But yes, you need to see the video. That was sort of a teaser we had for tonight. So maybe they can post it. I think they may be posting over in the comments, but I'll make sure you get that. But thank you, Bill Sweetzer, for continuing to bring history alive in challenging and provocative ways, Bill, and challenging us to hold on to this DNA that's been part of this story since 1812, as you make so clear in a copious fountain. Thank you, Tom, for your constant presence and prayers with this place. And Dr. Davis, thank you for shepherding. This could go on for hours, and I almost wish it could, given some of the contributions, but thank you, Beck, for guiding the conversation. Yes, this event is kicking off a series of events. Tim has given me the rundown. This is the Currie Lecture that we're kicking off 2022 with. We'll have a live stream chapel service on the 29th to celebrate our 20th anniversary. None other than Tom Currie will bring the gospel to us on that occasion. Please live stream. We can't have everybody there in person. We're still under COVID protocols, but we will make that service live streamed available to everyone on February 5th, which is the actual 20th anniversary date. We're going to have a pause to pray and give thanks to God for our actual 20th anniversary day. On April the 2nd, we're going to have a fun run. It'd be more of a fun jog if I'm involved with it, but we're going to have a celebration on the last day of the Spring 1 semester in Charlotte. On April 8th, which is the night before our graduation, we're going to have a gala here on the campus of Sharon Presbyterian Church. Lorenzo Small is the host of ceremonies, so it's going to be a festive occasion. And then following graduation on the 9th, we're going to have a homecoming. And we're actually going to be celebrating, we hope, COVID allowing, the in-person celebration for our past 2 graduations. So it ought to be a grand event. And then on April 26th, we're going to, in conjunction with the Board of Trustees meeting, dedicate a gift of art and a new tour of art in our building. So there's a lot going on. Please stay tuned. This is a great year of celebration, and we're all grateful to God for what God has done thus far in the first 20 years, and looking forward to the next 20 years and the next 100 years of Union Presbyterian Seminary's witness on behalf of the kingdom. I think that brings us to a conclusion, and I think Mike Frontiera will take over. But thanks to you all, both those on the screen and also those in the comment section. We are so deeply grateful.
And I thank all of my students for listening in. It's great to see your names. It's wonderful. And hello to the Cecilos.
Thank you all, and thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day.